What's going on, everyone? This is Ethan, the Games Adjuster, and today we are talking about the 4-player game, Flick of Faith. So, Flick of Faith is a game published by Awaken Realms. It is a dexterity game where players will be flicking their profits, these little small discs, onto their islands, trying to gain presence and domination. So, it's basically an area control game with a dexterity element, and it's pretty quick to play. So let me go down to the table. I'll show you how it plays. We'll talk about storage, and we'll come back here for some final thoughts. So here we go. Okay, here we have a 4-player game of Flick of Faith set up. To begin the game, each player is going to get 4 temples, which are these larger circular discs. They're going to get 5 prophets, which are the smaller ones. Here we have this yellow player, which is using the raw god, and instead of one of the normal small prophets, they actually substitute a sphinx. Each player has a special god that gives them special abilities. We'll talk about that here momentarily. You're going to set up a reserve of tiles and coins or victory point tokens and all kinds of other things. So here we have 5 points, 3 points, 1 points, some special tiles that can be used by the characters or perhaps will come up in the different laws that will enact throughout the game. You'll also have some of these larger discs and the more profits that you might have access to depending on the laws that come up. You'll notice over here to the left, kind of near raw, is a deck of cards. These are the laws that we were mentioning, and there are all kinds of special things that will come up in the council phase. And then you'll lay out this mat here, of course, with the different player islands, and you're ready to begin, basically. So every player will also actually get one of these handy dandy player rules days. It's kind of hard to see there a little bit, but pretty helpful. So to begin the game, all the players will be flicking one of their prophets from their corner. So your corner is represented by these clouded borders here. So this entire area is, for example, the yellow player's corner. And so they can flick from here. All the players at one time will flick towards this navel area here. Whoever gets the closest becomes the first player. So let's just assume Ross first. And then you're ready to begin. When you get your god, you actually have 2 sides to it, so you can choose which power you want to use. Here we're going to go with Ra, again, who gives us a Sphinx instead of the normal prophet, and it's considered a prophet. But here in Nubis says each generation, the first time one of your prophets goes to the reserve pool, you flick that prophet from your corner right after the active player's turn. And then every player, again, there's 4 different cards, each card double-sided. So the game is actually really, really simple, but really fun, which is a little bit of a spoiler for my review at the end. So the game consists of 3 generations, and each generation has 3 phases. The first phase is the council phase. Players will be voting on these law cards. You'll shuffle them up at the beginning of the game, and then you'll deal out 2 each generation. So the first one here says, Borderless Faith. Until the end of the game, you'll notice some of them are until the end of the game. Some of them are just during the current mission phase. But this one here says, if a prophet touches a border of an island, city, or navel, it is outside of that island, city, or navel. Normally throughout the game, anything that touches the line is considered to be part of the area that it's touching. So this would be considered to be on this island, or on this city, or in the sea, or in the navel. But this law would make it such that if it's touching the line, it's considered in the sea instead. Or the players can vote on this one, for example, which is this is money. Current mission phase, there are no turns in this mission phase. After a short countdown, players will flick their profits as fast as they can. First player to run out of profits shouts stop, and the mission phase ends immediately. During the current mission phase, you ignore god abilities and all other laws. You cannot build temples nor score the naval. So this would really change kind of the game flow. That's what we'll be discussing here momentarily. So let's just pretend we get to the council phase. And when you're in the council phase, you're going to be voting. So all players will have their thumbs like this, neutral, and then you'll say 1, 2, 3, vote. Up means you'll go for the top one. Down means you'll go for the bottom one. If there's a tie, you'll grab them up together. You'll shuffle them up, blah, 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 blah. And then you'll reveal one. Great, we got borderless fate. Okay, so this is the law that's in place until the end of the round, or until, in this case, the end of the game. And the other one is discard. So then players will move on to actually taking turns. So when a player takes a turn, they'll take one of their prophets, and this is now called the mission phase, put it anywhere in their corner, and then flick it. When you flick, you can either do the thumb tucked version, kind of a lot of power, or you can just kind of push your finger like that if you want to. After you flick, it becomes the next player's turn. If when you flick, you don't get it out of your cloud, like let's say I just kind of whiffed and I went like that maybe, I can flick it again. If, however, you flick and it doesn't land anywhere, you're done. No matter where it lands, you're always done. You can always hit other people's tokens. So let's say that was there. I could maybe knock that out. And if I land in a city, anytime I land in the city, it doesn't have to be on the border, it could be in the middle. In this particular case, the border wouldn't count, but let's just pretend that law wasn't in place. If I land and touch a city or I'm in the city, I can immediately remove this as the active player and put a temple down anywhere on that island. These are helpful because they won't establish presence from round to round, just like prophets will, except for temples are not removed at the end of the worship phase, which we'll get to soon. So that's one thing you can do. You're trying to get onto as many islands as possible. You're always also trying to establish domination of as many islands as possible. One of the other areas you can land beyond the 4 islands and their 4 cities would be the navel itself here in the center. Anytime you get a token in the navel, you will score a point for each island you have presence on. So here would be 1, 2 points, plus a point for each token you're removing from the navel itself, which would be another point for the yellow player. Okay, so the game flow again is just take your turn, flick a prophet anywhere on your corner, and the next player goes. Then maybe the green player goes that way, and then the purple player goes from here, maybe. And then the blue player, let's just pretend this was their island. There you go. And it goes about round and round and round and round and round. So eventually, the board will have all kinds of different things on it. And we'll get into the worship phase. Let's just see this a little bit. Anytime something lands off the board, so let's say I just completely missed, like this blue one here would go into this reserve pool and it's out of the game until the next round. Let's see this a little bit more. Okay, that looks good. All right, so let's say the board kind of looks something like that after everybody did all their flicking. Then you get into the worship phase. So in the worship phase, each player is going to score points for every island that they're on that they have presence, and presence is established by just having 1 prophet or temple on the island. Doesn't matter how many you have, it's still only 1 point. So let's do the yellow player here. They would have presence here, they would have presence here, none there, 1 there. So that becomes 3 points for the yellow player. And then we would do the same for everybody else. And then we would also check for domination. Domination is established by having the most temples and or prophets on an island. So here is a 3-way tie, 1, 1, 1. Nobody scores. Here, this green one doesn't count because the borderless faith action. So this one is still nothing, but it's 2 to 1 to 1 to 1, which would be 2 points for the green player. And then here we have a 2 to 1 for the blue player. And then here it's 1, 1, 1. Nobody gets it. No points are awarded. After that, players will then take back all of the profits into their areas. All the ones in the reserve pool will then go back to the appropriate players. And then a new round begins by passing the first player marker to the next player to the left and starting to go through the council phase again, turns, taking actions, and trying to get the most points. After the end of 3 generations, whoever has the most points is the winner. If there's a tie, then whoever has the most temples on the board is the winner. If there's still a tie, players can do the setup flick towards the navel again, and whoever gets the closest is the winner then. Now, it's not a lot of rules, so I kind of went through that really quick. What I really want to highlight now is going to be some of the special abilities that the players have and some of the laws that are going to come up throughout the game. So, here you can see, we'll just kind of run through it real quick. Themis, you may resolve a tie in the council phase, and you may win 1 tie in the worship phase. Or you could be Zeus. When building a temple, you may choose any island you want. Very cool. Ra, we already showed her this one. We have a Sphinx instead of one of the normal sized prophets. which is a little bit bigger. Well, quite a bit bigger actually, but smaller than the temple. Or you could be Anubis. Each generation, the first time one of your profits goes to reserve, you flick it from your corner right after the active player's turn. So someone else knocks your tile completely off the board, you get a free flick from your corner once per generation. Okay, Dagda actually has this Hand of God token, which is pretty much like a backboard on the board here. So you may use it during your mission by holding it the way its fingertips touches the board, and no other components while you're flicking. So you could basically put this here and then flick it and use it kind of to ricochet off where you want it to go. On the other side of that, you've got Morrigan. At the end of your turn, place opponent's off-map profits onto this card. Instead of the reserve, you get 3 points in the worst phase if you have at least 2 profits on this card. So you're purposely trying to knock your opponent's things off the board so you can score points. And then finally, the last 2 here, we have Tyr. You may flick your profit with the weaker hand. If you do, and it lands on an island, flick it again with that same hand. Or Freya, at the beginning of the worship phase, drop the heart token from at least 2 centimeters above the map. If the heart rests on at least one of your profits and at least one of your opponent's profits, then all such opponents' profits count both for you and their owners when computing presence and domination. Pretty cool. So that's one of the ways the variety is added to the game. The other way is, of course, through these laws. There are all kinds of laws here. Some are silly, some are just kind of change the way things score. So you'll see here Red Sea. Until the end of the game, every worship phase, the player with the most profits in the sea gets 3 points. Dominus effect, every worship phase presence on at least 3 islands gives 3 additional points. Some of them will give you, you have to flick it different ways. Flick with your smallest fingers, or until the end of the game, replace 2 of your profits with these Templars, which are bigger than the profits, but it's much smaller than the Sphinx. Same kind of thickness, just wider surface area. And then you also have things that will introduce new tokens to the game. So there's a tornado. Let's see here. Here we go, tornado. You'll take this tornado token here. It says the first player puts a tornado token onto the map, touching the navel, but no profits or temples. Whenever a prophet or temple touches the tornado, remove this prophet or temple from the map. If the tornado is pushed off the map, remove it from the game. Or even you can have the King Ape token, which is this little black token here. And King Ape says, put the King Ape on the navel. An island which contains King Ape does not give points. If you push off the map, remove it from the game. And again, there's all kinds. You can flick with your eyes closed. You can flick so that the discs are vertical first before you flick them. And you'll just resolve those throughout the game. You'll only have 3 generations, but of course you can play multiple rounds. So there you go. Again, I know that was quick. It's not a hard game. The rule book is only 11 pages long and there's big pictures in it. So not much to see here, but let's go to storage and then we'll talk final thoughts. Okay, let's briefly talk storage. So the game kind of comes in a weird shaped box. It's this very skinny, long rectangle. Now the mat is a nice mat. It's got stitched edges, very nice, very colorful. It just kind of rolls up pretty neatly, and you can stick it in this little section here. And then what I did was, I believe the tokens all came bagged up together. I separated them based on the color and their gods and to put the reference cards in each one. So I kind of have them set such that everything piles up on one side, upside down on each other. So like here, this one, and then finally the last player. Put that on this larger side. I kept the insert, and actually this does go in this green one. We got a hand here. But do that, and then on the left side here, I do have the rule book as well as the coins and then like the victory point tokens and the remaining pieces here. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's not a whole lot of pieces. Fits pretty neatly, and there you go. That is how you store Flick of Faith. Okay, there you go. So let's start talking about the theme first. So theme-wise, it's okay. There's some thematic ties to the special god powers. Like, Ra has the Sphinx, which is tied to Egyptian lore. And of course, it's not really that thematic. Like, why is a Sphinx a larger thing? Other than monuments are big, right? So I guess kind of, Zeus having his powers, the ability of Freya to drop a little heart to try to sway the people towards her side. So it kind of makes sense. It's not great. It really could have been anything. You could probably slap a different theme on it and justify it in your own way. So I'm not going to say it's super thematic, especially given ultimately, why would these gods all be sitting around a table flicking profits? Probably not. But still, it's fine. It's fine theme. Production-wise, it's outstanding. I think they did a really good job. Other than the shape of the box, which obviously doesn't fit on most people's standard nerd Calyx shelf. But beyond that, the actual artwork's great. The discs are good. You have to put stickers on them, not a big deal. I do like the mat itself. It's got stitched edges. It's really colorful and vibrant. The disc actually slide pretty good on the mat. So on the whole, I think the production is really good. There's nothing really other than the mat that's like outstanding, but I think the package together is pretty good and solid. Maybe the victory point tokens could have been a little bigger. They're kind of small, but again, that's a minor thing. So overall, I think it's good. And the same is true of the rules. I think the rules overall are pretty solid too. The player aids, I'll mention almost like a production ding too. I wish they would have chose a different color font on player aids as well as the law cards, because it's kind of a dark brown on a tan background, and it doesn't really read that well. Don't really mind the font choice, just the font color. Maybe black on white would have been a little easier to read. So again, it's a minor thing. It doesn't really make the game that hard to play. You can tough through it, but it was a little bit of a miss in my opinion. As far as the gameplay goes, it's fast, it's furious, it's fun. It's a lot of flicking, so you're going to play through, the multiple rounds. You get quite a few flicks in the game. Um, you're going to see some of those highlight moments that are kind of the calling card of these kinds of games. You want to have a dexterity game that's going to leave some laughs and some stand-up moments in the game, where you make this crazy shot and it ricochets off and it lands in the city and you get to put your temple, and then the next turn someone flicks it off. The mayhem and the chaos is going to happen, and that's fun. It's not a super strategic game. It's not. It's a really tactical game, obviously, because you're just making choices on where to flick. But it's still fun, and so that's what's kind of driving my final rating on this. When we get to that, is just going to be ultimately the gameplay is fun. I like that you have a wide area from which you can flick from. I like that it's not too specific on how you have to flick. Like some games are saying, well, you can't touch your thumb, or you have to do one finger. Here, you can flick it however you want to. Either way is fine. There's some fun with the way your flicks change based on the law cards that come in. Having to flick with your non-dominant hand, your smallest finger, lifting the disc on its side. That kind of stuff is just fun. And so again, it's not a super deep game. The scoring is pretty basic, and the scores are honestly end up pretty tight unless you have someone terrible who's flicking off the board. I mean, it's not that hard to tie with a lot of people on the domination side, and as long as you're on an island, you're going to get a point every round. So you're really not, outsmarting your opponent. You're really just trying to do the best with your flicking, and sometimes you're going to be the victim of those that are just not wanting you to do well, and it's again part of the game. So gameplay wise, solid. It's fun. Time is really quick, actually. So especially as a two-player game, we had played this probably 3 times back to back to back because it's so short. And with even a 3 or 4 player game, same kind of thing. It's not that long. You can run through a game super quick. You can play it again if you want to right afterwards, or you could just use this as a filler between other games. And so I like that it's easy to set up, easy to tear down. You saw I had, I think, 7 bags, miscellaneous counters, the 4 players, the victory point tokens, and then the cards. And that's it. And then the mat you just roll up, stick in the box, and you're done. So tear down, set up, super easy. I think the time is really solid. And the box says 30 to 40 minutes. That's pretty accurate. You might even get it done in like 20 minutes with just 2 players. And then finally is the variety. And now here is where it's like a meh but could be a plus. So there were some promos. I did order one. I really liked the game. So I ordered like the Santa Claus promo, and then there's an expansion. I think it's called Cataclysm. I pre-ordered that. It hasn't come out yet. But with that, there's supposed to be like a Cthulhu promo. So I think there's maybe one other promo out there too, which I think would be cool, just to add more gods that you can play around with. I don't know that they're going to add more law cards in the promos, but definitely in the Cataclysm, there's going to be a lot more going on in there. So I'm hoping that that adds a lot more variety to the game, because as it is, if you play 3 times, you'll effectively see all the law cards that there are. And if you play 3 times and everybody flips over once, you're going to see all the god cards too. And so I don't know that it's got a ton of variety, and that, again, it's not a very strategic game. There's not really much more than the flicking, and if you don't have more laws and god cards or god powers, then it might get a little samey over several plays. So just keep that in mind. It's something they did improve upon, because there is the expansion and the promos out there, but without those, the base game, that might become a problem later down the line. Also, I do want to mention on the gameplay, I do think that it's cool how you have the different size discs available too, and it's really cool if those come up, and they may not always come up, so just be aware of that. But I really do like that you have that also. So yeah, on the whole, I think it's really solid. So I have Flick 'em Up right now. I have everything for Flick 'em Up, and as much as I like Flick 'em Up, I have a really hard time getting it to the table, because it's so much to set up. This is not a review of Flick 'em Up, but in that game, if you've seen it, there's a lot of little buildings you'll set up. They have little stands, and you have to set up terrain, and then there's rules with flicking bullets at people, and if you can't knock other stuff in while you're flicking, and you're having to reach your hand basically into this little city that you make to do all the flicking. So it really makes it, because of how obtuse the setup is and all that's going on, although it looks really cool on the table, it makes it hard to get to the table. This might replace my flicking game of my collection, because of how simple it is to get to the table and easy to play, and not as frustrating as maybe that game might be, because of the fiddliness of flipping hats and having to put your hand so in a certain way to flick, or can't put your finger behind, just flicking like this, especially for families, because this I can easily play with my 11-year-old and she does fine. The other game, not so much, because of how fiddly it is. And although that might have more variety, this, again, I can get to the table more comfortably. So with all that said, again, it's not a super deep game. There's not a ton of variety as it stands right now, but I still will give it a really solid 7 out of 10. It's a really fun dexterity game. If you're just looking for something casual and easy to teach, but fun to play for the family, I think this is definitely it. It's not as, I guess, not overbearing, but it's just not as much as like some of the other flicking games. Now, of course, probably the best flicking game still is Crokinole or Pitchcar, one of those two. But I think this is a good entry for the family. If you're looking for something that's small footprint, easy to set up, not expensive. I was able to get that, I think, for like $40, compared to like a Crokinole, which is like $200 for a nice board, or a Flick 'em Up, which is a lot more going on, or even like a Pitchcar, which you can buy a simple box, but if you really want a big truck, it's obviously huge and expensive. So if you're just looking for something small, table size for your family, I think this is a great entry. Check it out, Flick of Faith. That is published by Awaken Realms. For if you've played other dexterity games that you think might be similar, or could also compete with maybe what this demographic is going for, let me know about those in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.